Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, September 21st, 2020. This evening we have a relatively full agenda, so without delay we will get to our first item. I wanted to announce this evening the Select Board will take a vote on the Hallston Police Association Successor Collective Bargaining Agreement. Briefly, this contract expired June 30th, 2020. In the months leading up to that deadline, the town attempted to negotiate with the Holliston Police Association. I believe we had one or two meetings in early March, late February, when the COVID pandemic took hold and kind of put aside our efforts. Shortly after Mr. Ahern joined our organization, we started meeting again with the association. Over a period of weeks, we've come to an agreement. In this case, will be an agreement which will take us through FY21 to June 30th, 2021. The agreement calls for basically a 0% cost of living allowance agreement, or increase, I should say, and several other items that were in consideration of the short term, but yet the reality of the economic conditions that we all face. I want to thank the Holliston Police Association, Chief Stone, and especially you, Travis, for your work on this. This is an important agreement for a lot of reasons. I think it recognizes the economic realities that we all live with, but also a commitment to fair and equitable contracts. This evening, my colleagues and I have reviewed the content at our executive session last week. So without further ado, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the Holliston Police Association Successor Collective Bargaining Agreement.
Move to approve the Holliston Police Association Collective Bargaining Agreement, effective today through June 30th, 2021.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Are there any comments?
Just thank you for the work that you both did. I think that this contract is
All him.
a good contract.
There's a lot of wordsmithing, a lot of tracking, and number crunching. Matt Stone did a great job too, so thank you to him. All set, Ben?
I'm all set, thank
All
you.
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. We'll endorse. Give us a moment. There we go. I should point out that as a result of this contract being effectively through the end of the fiscal year, our efforts will result in a renewed effort to rejoin the table for negotiating sometime after the calendar year, right? January, February, to look at the typical long-term 3-year contract that we normally have. So we'll get to that when the weather gets a little colder. All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
That goes to Travis.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks
Thank you,
again to
Travis.
the association, and let's move on. The next item, the governance committee will join the select board. I see up on our screen we have Mr. Tyler, Mr. LeBeau, Mr. Engel. Oh, I see.
Christina Lingan.
Yeah, I see Christina. I can't see very well actually. And is Scott with us? I don't see so. All right, so we will bring in Sam Tyler, I guess, as the spokesman for the governance committee for an update on their efforts. Good evening, Sam.
Evening. Actually, since we're virtual, we have to go through the exercise of reading the required statement and have a roll call, and then we can get started. So, pursuant to the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Paragraph 20, as a Select Board's emergency order dated 3/16/2020, the governance committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the town's website within 24 hours in accordance with the governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. All participants, including members of our committee, remotely attending this meeting, please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. Now, at this time, we'll have a roll call attendance, starting with Mr. Engel. Present. You can see he's present. Mr. LeBeau. Present. Ms. Lingham. Present. Scott McKechnie. And Tyler, present. Okay, well, I got 4 out of the 5 right now. Scott should be joining us soon.
It looks like Scott is here.
No.
Technical difficulties, I'm sorry.
All right, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, we're all here. Thanks. So, since we last met on, I guess, the 31st of August, we've had a meeting with the 3 financial officers, our principal assessor, our treasurer collector, and our town accountant, which was, I think, productive in that we learned more about the budget process. They certainly have some as to how they think it could be improved, and I think we'll be really more involved in the town administrator. So I know that'll happen. But there's some other ideas as well. So that was good. We met with on the 21st of this month. We met with the the finance committee on the 15th of September, which was an interesting meeting for us, although it was very informative. I think we were thinking we were going to ask more questions, but after minutes of hearing from the finance committee, we finally got to be able to ask a question. I think it was, they certainly have views as to, why the committee was more involved in the past couple of years. I think they are looking forward to working with the town administrator and thinks that it can mean that more responsibility shifts to the town administrator. I think they're not sure there's really a need for change, that things will work well. We have a more active town administrator. Subsequent to that meeting, we received a letter from the chair of the finance committee explaining how his interpretation of the legal requirements, both in state law and bylaw, regarding the finance committee and what that means in terms of the process. I'm speaking for myself here because we haven't had a chance to talk about this, but I think that that there's one view from somebody who's been very much involved with the process over the years, some ways with other views that in some ways it just reinforces the idea of the importance of perhaps a bylaw that does lay out and outline the budget development process and the responsibilities of the various parties. But which is something that we're working on right now. And then after this meeting this week on the 24th, on Thursday, we will be meeting with the school committee in terms of their part of the budget process and any recommendations that. So I don't know if there's any of the other members of the committee want to add to my overview here. Come on, I didn't nail it that well.
Hey, Sam, it's Scott McKechnie. The only thing, I'm not sure if you added that we have reached out to some of the other town administrator and town managers to talk to them about their process. Did you mention that?
No, that was going to be, at least in our agenda, that's the second item on the agenda to talk to the select board about. This was really meant to be just our impressions of the 2 meetings that we've had with the financial officers and the finance committee.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, Sam, that the feedback's been was pretty good.
All right. Any other comments? All right, then I'll go on to what Scott had raised. One of the things that I think you, as the members of the select board, you know that we prepared what we call a matrix budget table of 15 towns that all have an article, and many of these towns have charters, so it's in their charter, but it's an article that generally is titled Finance and Fiscal Procedures, which really provides an outline guide to their budget development process. So having prepared that table, and from that table you can see trends and these are all towns that have town administrators or town managers, and it's pretty even. I think there are 8 towns with town managers, town administrators, although Midway just changed the title of their town administrator to town manager, but their bylaws and their charter remains the same in terms of administrator. So we'll still, for our purposes, we'll still count it as town administrator. So it's pretty, 8 town managers, 7 town administrators. But it is interesting to see who's responsible for what in the budget process and how that compares to Hallston. We've decided to follow up on that table, and each of us have divvied up names of the town administrator or town manager, and we're in the process of reaching out to talk to them. We've got a series of questions we want to ask, dealing with the process and the advantages of having such an article or a charter or article or bylaw dealing with the budget process. Because Hallston is silent on this issue in its bylaws, and I think there's some. I think we've already, seeing that there's some differences of opinion as to responsibilities because it's not written down in a way that the town has approved through approving a bylaw. So, in my mind, that just reinforces that that's something that's necessary down, even if it's a different situation where with a more active town administrator. So that's in the process. I've had conversations, and I think that they're both very positive in terms of being helpful and explaining, in their view, the importance of that article and basically how it works in their town. It's one thing to see it in writing in how it's written in the bylaw. It's a whole other matter sometimes to the people involved and hear from them about the process and be able to ask questions. So that's a while longer to complete, but I think will be worthwhile as we sort of settle in on finishing up a recommendation along this line, or at least moving it forward a lot more.
Thanks, Sam. Are you willing to proceed with your agenda, or do you want to take questions from our board as we move forward here? What's your take?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right.
Happy to. I think we're all happy to take questions.
All right. Any questions to date, Ben, on what Mr. Tyler has just brought forth?
I have one question. As you're looking at other towns, have you put together criteria or certain things that you're in particular looking at as to what's working and what isn't? I think one of the things that I heard our finance committee chair mention in the meeting last Tuesday was when he looked at, say, elected FinComs versus appointed FinComs, he saw that appointed FinComs tend to see more growth than an elected FinCom. Now, I don't know which towns he looked at or anything like that, but I just was using that as a reference to sort of, as we look at these 15 towns, what kinds of criteria are you using to determine whether or not it's sort of a successful or a productive relationship or process for these towns?
Well, I think that what we were looking for was mainly how they went forward with developing their budget. So we were looking for what we found in terms of these towns, the articles in either the charter or the bylaws that outline the budget development process. And because frankly, if you go to other bylaws of other towns, you don't usually see that. It's similar to Hallston, it's just silent on the issue. So there's no direction other than practice. So it's really finding these other towns that are, and some of them very local, but other towns that really have it, in a sense, written down as to what their budget development process is. That we wanted to, what could we learn from those towns first, which is why we picked them in the first place, and we're following up with conversations with the town administrator or town manager. In some cases, if the town manager is relatively new, there's an assistant town manager or town administrator who's been there longer, and so we're talking to that person instead. I will also say, in terms of your comment about elected versus appointed, I think I've seen a survey by the Massachusetts Association of Finance Committees that I've actually added to, but it's over like around 150 towns, and it's probably 80% of those towns Finance Committee is appointed. So the elected process is relatively rare in Massachusetts among towns at this time. I think they've and the appointment is more by the moderator than any other official, but there are some appointing committees that are made up of could be the moderator or sometimes the town clerk, with the chair of the board of selectmen and the chair of the finance committee that appoint. But appointment is by far the more preferable of the options available to towns in creating their finance committees.
Anything else, Ben?
No, I think.
Tina?
Yeah, I have two questions. So references to past practice and the successes with past practice become a little less relevant for me if your committee feels like the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016 offers some guidance. I'm not sure how your committee feels about that, if you feel that that may be a place to go for guidance as you look at changes that may benefit the town. Again, whether or not the MMA of 2016 offers a way forward for considering changes to either policies and procedures or bylaws.
Well, we'll look at the Modernization Act, but we wanted to go through this exercise first and become familiar with other towns and hear from other towns that had taken steps to have something structured in their bylaws or in their charter. And so we have certainly more work to do, but this is where we are right now.
Yeah.
Anything else, Tina?
I think I'm okay. Yeah, no, that's it. Thank you.
Sam, I can't tell you how impressed I am with the work you and your committee have done to date. You dived right into this project, and you're undertaking some very serious work. I recall back this past spring when you sent some correspondence to the select board about some concerns you had. Your history working with the town of Holliston on governance matters goes back over 30 years. And I have to compliment you for not only your commitment to helping the town understand how it can be its very best with governance, but also thinking forward and helping us understand how we can continue that evolution. Your committee members also reflect that same commitment. It's a great group, very impressive. One thing that I would like to stress as you move forward in consideration of any recommendation that comes our way is some kind of a clear tool to help us distinguish between what you folks may be recommending to us and what the impact is. Let me give you an example. Earlier this year, when you corresponded with us, you mentioned some observations that during the budget process there were roles that were convoluted. Perhaps some of them may be reaching the point previously identified through the Special Act of 1994 and that of the town administrator. And furthermore, the need for some examination of some definitions for functions that may or may not be within existing bylaws. I think, to state it, and feel free to correct me, there was, in your opinion, some ambiguity to the financial budget process, and your impression was that we needed to iron out those differences. So as I envisioned what that would look like, may I suggest a similar matrix to the one you're using for the comparative analysis of communities, in that you look at each of the roles or each of the duties and define what is the current view and then what is the proposed view, and help us identify what changes by function. I've also read some of the correspondence and observed the Finance Committee meeting, and as I try to follow the bouncing ball over where things need to be, either through bylaw or special act, I'm finding myself getting lost. I can only imagine how somebody at town meeting or anybody watching tonight, how they might feel. Navigating these fine points is critical to understanding how we are going to be better as a community governing our financial planning. So if I could ask that of you and your committee going forward, I think it would be very, very beneficial to us, considering any changes that you may recommend.
I think we would want to do that anyway, because I think this is not a simple issue, and we know that before we need to schedule some hearings ourselves to be interested members or residents that want to learn more. And, it's too complex, I think, that just multifaceted to be able to just present it at town meeting. So there's a whole, I think, education component, even when we're finished putting everything together, and we're still a ways away from that. And try to use the KISS method and be able to explain to the residents, why we think there's a need for change and what that change is and how it compares to the way it is now.
Could I ask if I could ask a follow-up question of Paul LeBeau, who, having been our town administrator for many years, has a certain insight. Paul, if I could ask you, do you see this process as needing some level of improvement? Do you see some change necessary?
All about, yes, I do. I think there's room for improvement, and I think that there are some examples out there in other communities that I think with some tweaking could be considered as helpful to the process in Hallston. Shortly after I started working in Holliston, Sam Tyler was one of the first people I met as an interested town resident and former town official. Despite that, I stayed in Holliston for over 30 years. But I think throughout that time, as you noted, Mr. Cronin, Sam has been active in a variety of ways in the community, and it's been helpful to have that perspective of a kind of a broader view of what other communities are doing, and in some senses, what state agencies kind of expect local government to do. I think that'll all come to bear on the deliberations we have as we go forward on this issue and on other issues. It's a great committee with a lot of different backgrounds, and I think all those perspectives will go into the final analysis that we come up with on each issue we address.
Paul, are you ruling out the possibility of supporting a bylaw to that extent?
Ruling it out?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Okay. So you've got some work to do to understand what that impact might be and ultimately what the details are to assign and define these roles in a way that's quite clear and survives everybody on the Zoom call tonight. So 10, 20 years from now, people understand what they're supposed to do and where that responsibility lies, right? So
I can say from at least the two conversations I've had with other town administrators how valuable they believe that is to have a roadmap that is followed and that you know what the process is. And, you know, just it's one thing they have emphasized quite a bit in terms of importance, you know, and why they are glad that their town has, you know, such an article in their charters.
I think, you know, speaking for myself on this board, you know, we can certainly see the benefit of your work and this type of a process. I don't need to speak for the Finance Committee. They can do that for themselves, but I'm sensitive, having been a former member, that they do possess and reside over a very important part of our governance. Anything we produce has to recognize their role quite clearly and definitively, and not in any way impede what is desired of the Finance Committee through our existing bylaws and that which is defined in Mass General Law. In other words, this task is not in any way, in my mind, should it be designed to impede their authority. I'm hoping that your product shows us to be better at governing, smarter at governing, and it's progressive to the point where we will, if we do pull it off and we see some benefit to it, we're better for it. We have a better understanding what's required. I think if we cannot achieve that, then the effort is not worth going forward. I don't want to stand in the way of your efforts, but I also don't want to cloud this by thinking that anybody's looking for a power grab or anything like that. We simply want to make Holliston governance better, and I think you share that goal.
Well, I think we all agree that the Finance Committee plays an extremely important role in the checks and balances that it provides, and I don't think that whatever we recommend will in any way affect the legal authority of the Finance Committee to review all the financial items on the warrant and actually go beyond that, and, you know, report and recommend, which is really what their authority is. So nothing's going to change that. I think there may be you know, a broader role for the town administrator, but it really won't affect the fact that the Finance Committee will be the body that will, you know, double check everything and make sure that, you know, it makes sense and reconcile, hopefully, if there are differences, as has been the case in the past. So, no, they'll continue to play a very important role in the town finances.
Anything else on your agenda, Sam?
Yeah, there is, I mean, as you know, you appointed this group to a 3-year term, and what we're dealing with right now is just really the budget development process, and there's much more to be done in other areas. But one thing that, since it is for 3 years, I would ask you to consider now, and that is the Department of Revenue, the Division of Local Services, that reviews towns' operations and comes back with recommendations. I think in 1987, when we approved the change of the town treasurer and town accountant from an elected position to an appointed position, we relied on the Division of Local Services for assistance there as well. And I think that this would be helpful. I think there's issues in terms of, you know, the large number of elected positions in town that have their own authority, and that really does hinder in some way a more centralized government structure. You know, there's issues in terms of, well, I know from the work in 1994, in the town administrator position, that, and I mentioned this before, that we felt we had to hold back on authority to the town administrator in order to seek approval. And as it was, a member of the select board and a former member of the select board definitely opposed to what had been recommended. So I think there's going to be a need to look at the town administrator position and up to where other towns are in terms of responsibility. I mean, the town administrator here appoints 4 positions. I think I was just looking at a town where it was like 21 positions were appointed by the town administrator. We're not suggesting that, but I'm just saying there's a big contrast in other towns. But I think it would be helpful to have, to request the Division of Local Services to, or contract with them to come out to Hallston and review and recommend, changes in the governance structure or governance issues. But I can provide more information. This is just to get you to think about it and that it can be achieved, in time before we complete our work.
Any questions on that, Ben?
No. I think that's pretty straightforward. And
Okay, Tina?
Well, I assume then the governance committee will, when you do get back to us about the idea of having DLS come out to consult and look at the opportunities for the TA to appoint more positions, you'll give us more information as to what you have in mind for those positions that could be appointed. I see you're not prepared to do that tonight, but that'll be forthcoming?
No, I mean, I will. One thing is obvious is the new facility manager position. In the special act creating the town administrator, facilities is one of the town administrator's responsibilities. So it just would make a lot of sense to have the town administrator appoint the facilities manager. So it's issues like that are pretty common and makes sense to shift over from the select board making the appointments to the town administrator. It's not a huge number, but there are some obvious ones like that.
Okay.
Anything else, Tina?
No, thank you.
Sam, I would recommend, obviously we're looking at the budget development process because of the timing, right? We are on the eve of planning, believe it or not, fiscal year 22. In a couple of short months, templates or guidelines associated with that planning will go out. And so the thought process of defining the budget development process now is, from a timing perspective, preferred. However, what you're speaking about, which is sort of downstream, may I recommend that maybe you team back with your committee and look at what would be a 2.5-year remaining plan. What do you hope to achieve over that time period? Give us an outline of the various parts of our governance that your committee feels need our attention, and base it on a timeline. I like the DLS advice. I think it's a great source of information. They're very good at delivering information without judgment. And but looking forward, I guess I'd like to understand what would you and your committee hope to achieve in year 1, year 2, year 3? How does that fit into the overall arc of what you're trying to do?
Sure. I mean, we need to do that for ourselves, and be happy to share that. I think I think there was originally thinking in terms of that for this coming special town meeting, we might be able to be ready to make a presentation regarding the budget development process, but there are other issues there that there are sort of interlocking articles that would tie into this that would take some time. So a little concerned about the current date of the special town meeting and be able to do anything with that. And I think there are also some of the members are sensitive to the issue of procedural questions that could arise in terms of a bylaw being addressed at a special town meeting, which is doable with the select board approval, but otherwise not. And is this going to be another town meeting where we're going to try to streamline and make it quick because we're still in the COVID-19, virus environment? So also, as I think I had mentioned to you earlier, I did check in with contacts that I have at the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation and the Policy and Research, who is talking to the chairs of Ways and Means, Senate and House, all the time. And they do their own analysis. I mean, it's their view that it's a $6 million gap between the governor's or the 2020 the 2020 budget and the 2019 budget, and apparently there's a feeling that the Senate is in the process of looking at different scenarios, and both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. And I think for revenues, they're talking about looking at increased corporate taxes or increased capital gains tax for individuals making over a certain amount. And I think the House is less clear as to what they're doing, but they don't expect the state to have a budget until certainly after the election, and I don't think they really feel much or anything will come out of Washington until January. So that's somebody from the outside of state government, but closer than most people to the whole budget process.
Regarding special town meetings, Sam, in a short while, we're going to hear from Chief Cassidy about some logistical public health readiness questions for that meeting. This afternoon, we received some pretty good news. I got a call from Senator Spilka's office confirming she'll join us next Tuesday night, along with hopefully Rep. Dykema, to discuss that very issue, the state's condition and readiness for an FY21 budget. We recognize that the uncertainty of what that plan is against what the town needs to perform in terms of FY21 functions is creating a little bit of stress. We'd like some clarity like everybody else in the state. Hopefully we'll learn some more by next Tuesday, enough so that I would like to put on our agenda, Mr. Ahern, the potential for a vote on potentially moving town meeting based on what we hear next week. So in the event that we hear that we're favorably positioned with a special town meeting on October 26th, we'll live with it. If we hear things that tend to influence the idea that moving it would be beneficial, you'll hear about that hopefully next week, Sam.
Okay. Good.
Is there anything else for our select board this evening from your governance committee, Sam?
I don't know. Any other members have any questions or comments you'd like to make?
I would just, if I may, I would just jump in and say I'm excited to see the recommendations that come from the governance committee. You're obviously doing very hard work. I feel like we've had great success recently with screening committees for the facilities manager, for the town administrator. I think when we put our residents to good work as volunteers on these committees, they produce great results. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing your recommendations, hearing what you have to say. I think to John's point, good governance, better governance is coming our way from your efforts, and I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead,
I
sir.
was just going to say that in reading some of the bylaws or special acts for town administrator, I've seen a number of towns that have it in their bylaws, the structure of the committee that would be the search committee. So it's very formal in terms of very specific about who's on that committee, and it's usually a lot of number of town officials. So it's not just whoever wants to volunteer. It's very more specific. So, but that later on, not this year, but that'll be something we'll be looking at.
any questions from members of the Zoom? I see some folks from the FinCom. If you have any questions of what you might have heard tonight, now would be a good time to bring them forward. Hearing none. All right, Sam, I think we'll let you folks go. Thanks so much. Travis, you have a hand up.
They're going to adjourn. So they should
Yeah, we have to adjourn by a roll call.
Yep.
Okay, very well. Well, I'll let you perform that, and then you guys can move on.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. This is Scott McKechnie. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All above, second.
See, I have the same routine here. All right. Mr. Engel.
Aye.
Mr. LeBeau.
Aye. You have us well trained, Sam.
Ms. Lingham.
Aye.
Mr. McKechnie.
Aye.
Mr. Tyler. Aye. Okay, we're now officially adjourned.
Thank you,
We don't
folks.
have a follow-up, right? We're done?
Yeah, no follow-up.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Select board.
Thank
Good
you.
night, thank you.
Thank you, Tina. All right, we're going to move on our agenda. Next up is our coronavirus community update and our CARES Act programmatic update from Fire Chief Mike Cassidy. Good evening.
Evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. In terms of our update, I'm very pleased that as of last Wednesday evening at 6 p.m., our community went to the gray community risk level status on the DPH map, which was a reflection of the 14-day average for the period ending September 12th. However, I am anticipating that the map, when it's updated this Wednesday, based on a 14% increase during this past week, will likely skip right over the green level and likely go to the yellow. However, the 11 active cases that we have, 9 of them are a cluster associated with a congregate care facility, and the other 2 are co-located at a single-family home. So in terms of the community spread that's occurring, that cluster, again, is isolated to a single location that's being surveillanced by the Department of Public Health, along with Sam and VNA, our nursing consultant. And so I am not concerned that there is a large outbreak taking place in our community. Although I do want to warn everyone that our community risk level from the DPH standpoint will very likely change, jumping over one category and skipping to the moderate risk level on Wednesday evening.
Understood.
So again, my reminder, as I do every week, wash your hands, cover your face, distance yourself physically, and avoid crowds. That's it in terms of just
Would you kindly, for the public's reminder, inform them what the latest guideline is for gathering of folks both in a public format and a inside and outside? What are the current guidelines, Mike?
Certainly. For inside, unless it is a specific sector that has sector-specific guidance, such as education or houses of worship, indoor restriction is 25, and outdoor is 50. And that applies both to public as well as private venues. So it doesn't matter if it's a gathering in your neighbor's backyard or if it is a gathering at a public location.
Mm-hmm. Any questions on that, Ben? No, not this time. Tina?
What was it on July 20th?
July 20th, it was 50% higher. It was 100%. It was 100 people outdoors, and it was 50 indoors.
Okay.
But that did not apply to legislative bodies, because that's another sector-specific,
Okay, that was-
as called out in the regulations. So if there is a sector-specific guidance that supersedes those numbers, which is
Okay.
why we're allowed to have partial occupancy of our schools with a hybrid model, because they're not restricted to 25 people in a school.
Okay. There's been no change then to a legislative body being able to gather indoors for the purposes of a legislative body since town meeting in July?
That is correct.
Okay, so one could make the assumption that even though in general gatherings indoor and outdoor have decreased the size that's allowable, that is not true for planning for town meeting.
Correct. For
Thank you.
legislative gatherings as well as for elections, the guidance did not change from the state.
Okay.
Mike, if you want to move on.
Absolutely. So, with regards to the CARES Act, and I have two requests for the board this evening. Both of them come under the sanitation and refuse collection category, which would be 100% CARES eligible if approved by the board. The first one is a request from the Sustainability Coordinator in the amount of $34,630.22. And this is for increased solid waste and recycling disposal costs that are related to the response to the coronavirus. Essentially, because people have been home, they've been producing more household waste, and they have also been recycling more, not only just based on the fact that they were home and not at work or not at school, but also we have a sense that people were finally getting to the to-do list that they've had for a while and cleaning out the garage and the attic and the basement and anywhere else. And that has increased in significantly larger tonnage.
So these aren't E.L. Harvey costs, these are Wheelabrator costs, Mike?
Yes.
Yes.
Tipping floor? Yeah.
Yes, these are tipping fees. And so I believe you have a memo from our sustainability coordinator who ran the numbers, and it was his recommendation. And I know I've had conversations with the town administrator about this as well, and it certainly would be a benefit to the solid waste budget if we were able to do a journal entry to transfer some of these costs from the general budget over to the CARES Act funds.
Questions on that, Mr. Sparrow?
Could you just clarify the time frame that this would be, that this is impacting?
So this would be from March until September, so 6 months as of the time of the memo. So to be CARES eligible, it has to be after the CARES Act was approved.
Yes.
In late March.
Okay. So is this going to be something that we're going to, part of it will be reporting this week?
If approved, yes.
If approved by this board?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
I didn't understand your question. Could you? I didn't hear it correctly. Could you say it again?
Well, the time frame is beyond this week, but I believe what we're supposed to apply for is through, is it June 30th?
So
September 25th?
our quarterly reporting that's due this Friday
Yes.
is for the period ending June 30th.
So some of this, this 34,000 would be reported in that.
If it were
report,
voted by the
If it was
board,
approved
then-
by this board.
Yes, then we would reflect that based on when the costs were incurred, not when the vote took place.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's all I have. for
I don't mean to step on your toes and go out of line, Tina, but just to follow up to that question, the timing is a question of mine as well. Is this number reflective of a trend to December 30th?
Yeah, that's my
Or-
question.
That could be another ask, is my understanding.
Yes.
As we get towards the Q2 of this fiscal year, which is through December 31st.
Got it.
There could be another ask.
Got it. Okay, so this is only taking the projection through August.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks, Tina. I'm sorry, I stepped on you.
No, that was my question, is we
Oh.
will see another ask.
I anticipate that if the board acts favorably in this regard,
Yes.
that as other communities have done this same, arrangement whereby they've shifted some of the solid waste fees to the CARES funds, I would expect that we would make this a subsequent ask based on actuals from September through some period in November or December.
Okay. Okay. All right. No, I think this is a great use of the CARES. It's a little bit tricky, right? Because we didn't have this trash program. If you go back a year ago, when you're looking for a comparable time frame to say, are we spending more this particular month, say April of 2020? If you went back to April of 2019, we didn't have the new solid waste and recycling program in place. So you actually can't use that number as a comparison to say that we're spending more this past April of 2020. You have to look at the trends with the new trash program in place. So I would just want anyone who's going to look at those numbers, I may be the only person doing that other than Matt Zedek, but I think he's done a great job capturing the fact that we were trending down with this new program, and otherwise I think it would have been lost. So I'm pleased to see that Matt caught that and is able to describe it in a way that makes this an eligible cost that we can consider for approval. So nicely done, I would say.
Good job, Matt.
Thank you.
When I asked a question, Mike, about are these Wheelabrator, I don't know enough about the Wheelabrator contract to know if that's just waste, or does that also include does Wheelabrator do recycling, or is that a different program?
So it's broken down in the memo. 18,963.30 is solid waste, and 15,666.92 was recycling.
So when a homeowner is creating more recycling product at their home, and it's resulting in increased recycling costs, how's it getting there? Do we buy stickers for extra recycling? I know we buy stickers for extra trash, but
Right.
how is that extra recycling manifesting itself on the tipping floor for recycling?
Through the E.L. Harvey trucks. And so if you think of the bins that we have, if it used to be a
Half
third
full,
to a half
now it's
full,
full.
and now it's to the brim.
I see.
That's how it's arriving there.
Okay, and folks at home should know we actually pay for some of our recycling costs.
So can I just read this one line from his memo? So at $82 per ton tip rate, the town incurred an additional $15,666.92 in recycling disposal fees for the extra tonnage generated during the pandemic. And then, as the chief said, that is the recycling specific disposal fees. Once Matt Zedek added in the solid waste, that's how the total comes to $34,630, spot 22.
Okay, got it.
And if I might also add, with your indulgence, this does not include bulk pickups. Matt expected that if this were acted upon favorably by the board, that he also would do an analysis of the bulk pickup costs, and that also could be a subsequent ask.
We've had a lot of trash activity with people home so much.
And there's a backlog for people to have that bulk pickup. There's a significant waiting list.
Got it.
People cleaning out the garage.
All right, so let's take a vote on the request for an additional.
Could I ask
Ben?
one more quick question?
Of course.
It's slightly topical here, but is there any chance about getting, or have we already included the additional weekends for Marshall Street because a couple months ago?
That was not a part of the sustainability coordinator's analysis.
Okay.
We certainly could look at that.
Is that COVID related?
So, yes and no. So, I'm not sure how they would view that because the weekend is normally budgeted. You know, it was in
Yeah.
place at the time of the time that the CARES Act was voted in March. Because we closed municipal facilities, that facility was closed for a period of time.
And then it was open for like several weekends in a row. I'm just
With
curious.
both
if,
Saturday,
like,
Sunday, but there
yes.
had been multiple weekends where we weren't paying
Right.
someone an hourly rate.
So it would sort of, like, I'm making it up, we missed 10 weekends or something like that, but then we made up for it with over several weeks. I just was curious if we had done any of that analysis.
Right,
as well.
I'm not sure if there was a net increase there.
Okay.
We can look at it.
I'm curious.
It's a great question.
It might be diminutive, but I'm
Right.
just curious if there is. So, but that's all. Sorry,
All right.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
So based on what the chief said, I'd like to take a motion to approve an amount of $34,630.22. Chief, is that the right number?
Yes.
For the purposes of covering additional trash and recycling hauling costs related to the COVID pandemic.
Okay, I'll make that motion as stated.
Do I have a second?
Second, just making sure that this is 100% going through the CARES
Yes.
Act.
It is not female eligible.
It is not female eligible.
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries.
Great, thank you. And the second one, also in the same category, sanitation refuse collection, 100% CARES, would be $4,412 related to the waste containers that were at the 260 Woodland Street site. And the argument being made by our facilities manager is that because portions of state government shut down for several months in the early part of the pandemic, and therefore they were not able to come out and do compliance work and check the items that were in those waste containers that were just sitting on the property, we were paying the rental fee for those. So he was wondering if we would consider, again, it would be additional cost that was not anticipated as part of the project that was previously approved at town meeting of the amount of $4,412. Because it's my understanding that if it's not going to be covered through a CARES Act eligible expense, then it would likely be a request to the FinCom for a reserve fund transfer.
So in other words, if not but for COVID, the containers would have been moved sooner.
Because the state would have been able to come out, confirm compliance, and then we would have been able to have them
Right.
hauled off-site, correct?
And the time period that the containers were out there was
Within the
time.
period of performance.
Any questions on that, Ben?
No questions? Makes
Tina?
sense.
None.
I'll entertain a motion to approve $4,412 from CARES Act for reimbursement of costs associated with the 260 Woodland Street hauling bin rental fees. Did I get that right, Mike?
You got that spot on.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Oh, second, yes.
Second, yes, thank you.
Aye.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Aye.
And that was, you said 100%?
100% CARES as well.
Thanks. That's-
Yes.
okay, great.
Absolutely. I haven't looked at the agenda recently. When is the logistics discussion about?
I think now would be a good time unless
I
you
can
had
come
it
back,
somewhere
I'll be
else.
in the corner.
No, don't go too
Just kind
far.
of just ask one question before we move on to that topic.
Mhm.
Could you just send like an updated sheet of the CARES expenditures, the approvals, and all the good?
So the most updated version was sent out today.
Oh, I missed it?
The chief can add these,
Okay.
well, I mean, wait, because the chief will add these costs now that they've been approved to the bottom line.
Okay.
And so that we can get that out tomorrow, chief?
Yes, yeah, normally I finish it up on the weekend to have it ready for your Monday meeting, and then any votes that you make on a Monday night, I make sure to update before it gets to the FinCom on Tuesday.
Now I see it. Okay.
Happy
I
weekend,
apologize.
you.
sent it to me,
Okay.
so- You did send it. I apologize. I missed it.
So
thank you.
right, so that will be added, we'll get that with your votes tonight, and then tomorrow, that will go to the FinCom for their meeting tomorrow night with everything that you voted tonight. That's kind of how we've been progressing.
Okay.
Chief, a week ago, we'd asked you to come before us with sort of a logistical update / recommendation on how the community is shaping up for a special town meeting scheduled for October 26th. Knowing that there had been previous discussions about logistical challenges, we thought we'd ask you to check with our partners in the community, including schools, to find out how that meeting can be pulled off and what kind of recommendations come around it from a community standpoint. If you could fill us in on your homework.
Absolutely, thank you. So, of course, one of the reasons that we waited until this week for that update was because we needed to see what was going to happen as of September 16th, the scheduled first day of instruction in the buildings. Because the schools are now being used for curriculum delivery, that does pose adaptive challenges for the use of school facilities for a legislative body gathering such as a town meeting. Due to their sanitation and cleaning requirements, which is part of their safety plan, which was submitted to DESE, which was provided to the community, they would need to clean and sanitize any space that we used prior to students and staff coming back into the building. So they would not be able to host us on an evening where the school was in session the next day, which would mean that if we wish to use a school facility, then we would need to shift to either a night where school was not in session the next day, if it were a weekday, or a Friday night or a Saturday. We could probably do a Sunday, but it would have to be timed such that they would have sufficient time in their schedule to be able to do the cleaning before the Monday morning. So that is all predicated on
Just to be clear, so the current date, 10/26, is problematic by definition.
Yes, because
Gotcha.
they are scheduled to have classes on Tuesday, the 27th.
Got it. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Absolutely. So that's all predicated on if we're going to use a school facility.
Got it.
If we decided that we wanted to stick with the October 26th date, because that's what's been published previously, then we would need to look to perhaps a private nonprofit in town that might have a large enough facility that they would be able to host the meeting.
And are there such venues that can accommodate 100 to 150?
There are a few houses of worship that could accommodate us.
Okay.
I recognize that that would be a significant paradigm shift for us, and it could
It's
create.
2020, Mike. Come on. It's all, 2020 is a big paradigm.
Just rip the Band-Aid off.
That's it's all about do new things, right?
Right. So looking at the school calendar, if you're looking to postpone it a couple weeks, and also if you wanted to give some relief to the town clerk who needs to get through the election on the 3rd.
That would be ideal.
Yes, I do not want to invoke the wrath of our town clerk because this is a significant election season. There's no school on Wednesday the 11th, which would mean that Tuesday the 10th of November could be in play. If we were looking to do a weeknight, obviously we could look at Fridays because that would be an option because school's not in session on Saturday, or we could look at some Saturdays as well. Obviously, we'd want to avoid the Thanksgiving week, but these are the sorts of parameters in which we would need to start to plan. And I'm interested to hear, obviously, what our legislative contingent says next week on theirs. But at this point, my recommendation would be that based on the existing reopening plan and the safety plan that has been published by the school district, that if we wanted to have it on October 26th, we would not be able to have it in the school, and therefore your board may want to be considering moving it to an alternate date.
Okay. All right. Any questions, Ben?
Not at this time. I'm curious to hear what things go next week. It's pretty straightforward to me that we have to be cognizant of timing. I'm inclined to think we want to be aware of the election as well as we make the choices.
Tina.
You mentioned houses of worships being the most reasonable, large-scale, large-size facility. Have any of them indicated any willingness? I would think that they are already cautious and concerned about the public entering into their facilities for worship, and now we're talking about significantly larger numbers potentially entering in for for a town meeting. So have any indicated a willingness to?
I haven't broached it directly
Okay.
with them because I didn't want to get ahead of the process with your board.
Okay. Okay. My assumption would be that there's no interest. That would be my assumption, just based on my own personal experiences with attending. So if we put that aside.
I would counter with the indulgence of the chair that a house of worship across the street hosted a flu clinic recently.
That's true. That is true.
So,
Okay.
So
All right.
there is precedent for it.
Fair enough. Well, without knowing that they're willing, if we look at the calendar, I'm not comfortable with Friday the 30th because that puts us 4 days before the election. I think
October 30th.
I'm sorry. What I meant to say was October 30th. Friday,
Yeah.
October 30th puts us 4 days, 5 days in front of the election. I think that that's a significant burden for those involved with planning the election. So we're looking at, if we're talking about a Friday or a Saturday, the November 6th, 7th, 13th, 14th. I just put that out there for.
Chief, I recall when the previous select board encountered annual town meeting scheduling challenges, one of the things that we stumbled upon was a bylaw that suggested that we had to have the meeting on a certain time, a certain day. I cannot recall what the bylaw says regarding the special. Is this something you might want to go back and check, or do you have to remember?
So the fall town meeting, which is designated by two different terms in our bylaw, it's either called the fall town meeting or the special town meeting, which causes some confusion in terms of interpretation, because special town meeting normally is a gathering that's caused by a signature collection as opposed to a regular scheduled second annual meeting in the fall. It does specify that it's to be on that last Monday in October, but the emergency acts that were passed in the spring does allow your body to change that date in concert with the moderator.
Got it. Okay. Any questions on this from our Zoom call? Chief is bringing in some interesting information. Anybody have any questions? All right, hearing.
Could I just get clarification? You would like on the agenda for next week the ability to make a decision if you're ready at that point, so I'll put that on the agenda for
Yeah,
next item.
I think the intent was to take on a public health input from, from a community standpoint, from the chief. He's introduced some factors which I think this board needs to consider. And obviously the flip side of that is the financial benefit or not of moving town meeting. We'll hear from our elected officials on that next week, so.
Great.
That'd be great if you could do that.
Do you want me to talk to any of the private nonprofits, or do you want to wait until you've had further discussions and decisions?
I don't object to asking. I think it's, it's a strange time, and I think having options is a wonderful thing.
Right.
You don't have to we don't have to make any decisions at this time. We're just exploring. But there is one question I would like to ask in the interest of just checking a box. Get a little retro for you for a second. What would be the capacity of Upper Town Hall for a town meeting
41.
with socially distant? I see.
Correct.
So you've already thought about that.
Ar- Already walked it, and
Okay.
that's
Where town meetings used to be held back in the
yeah, but
day.
they were able to sit closer
Yes, they were.
on
Okay.
very small chairs.
Got it.
I just have one question, if you'll be able to get a hold of get feedback from the town moderator in time for our next meeting after Tuesday, to have his input, because you're telling us that the bylaws require us to have, the emergency orders require us to have approval by the town moderator to change the date.
He's to be involved in the discussion-making process.
Okay.
His role becomes amplified depending on how late you wait to make that decision. If you waited until October 26th and he needed to convene it to then
Right.
postpone it to a time and date certain, that's all in his jurisdiction. But if you're making the decision ahead of time, obviously it would be a courtesy to have him involved in that decision-making.
We'll absolutely reach out to them.
Anything else, Chief?
That's it for now.
Thanks so much for your update.
Thank
As
you.
always, well
Thanks,
done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Next item on the agenda are warrants. Mr. Hearn, I believe that's your world. Oh, excuse me.
No,
Oh,
mine,
sorry,
actually.
jumping the
clerk,
gun
it's
here.
mine.
The other warrants.
Yeah, the
You're
other
off the hook
warrant.
for now,
Warrant
guys.
discussion number 9 for you. This is the Ben Sparrow Show.
All right. So we have one warrant, so I'd like to make a motion to approve a warrant in the amount of $1,734,351.46. Of that, $130,709.34 is town payroll.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Public comment. Ben.
I have nothing at this time.
Ms. Hine.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to update the board that on Friday I met with the town inspector for Covanta for the transfer station. It felt like it was important to follow up with some of the concerns expressed at the Lowland Industrial Park Forum. And out of the conversation with the, again, town inspector for Covanta for the transfer station, a couple of things came up. They're all directed towards the Board of Health. And it's all in regards to truck traffic. I would say that Covanta is a great business in town. They are what's the word I'm looking for? The town inspector had nothing but good things to say about how they keep their facility and uphold their permits. And so the questions to the Board of Health are really in regards to truck traffic before it arrives at the site. So wanted to let the board know that I've reached out to the health agent, or health director rather, and asked to possibly be on their agenda to follow up on some of the concerns, since they oversee the permit for the transfer station. So that's just an update. That's all I have.
That's great. Thank you, Tina. Update for me involves a conference call we had last week. It was a Zoom, actually, with MassDOT. We had, through Rep. Dykema's office, secured a meeting with state highway officials from the Central Mass region. We were joined by the area district manager, a host of his deputies and directors associated with the work that they perform. Initially, this meeting was designed to address the state highway priorities that this board has signed off on, asking for MassDOT assistance with approximately 9 different items related to state highway improvements throughout Holliston. During the call, we discussed the Lowland Industrial Park Zoom call from August, as well as the looming 555 Hopping Brook and associated traffic impact issues. We did so at a relatively high level. There was no decision-making or heavy thinking. Rather, we wanted to build consensus and an understanding that the community was facing a tremendous impact on traffic, and we had simultaneously large projects and decisions that we were facing we needed their help with. I want to pass along to the community that when we had our call with the Lowland people back in August, we promised folks that we were going to undertake a process that was deliberate, open, and to some extent thorough, because we understood we'd have to work with MassDOT officials and other stakeholders to tackle the complex issue. This was a huge step in the direction of achieving that outcome. I was very happy with the call, Travis, you were on it. As a result of the phone call, MassDOT officials have agreed to come to Holliston and do a site walk at some of these affected areas, so they become more familiar with the various nuances of the traffic flows. We are not yet at the end of this process. We're just beginning in effect, but I want folks to know that we are locked in and we're focused on making sure that what we try to achieve at the end of the day is a balanced solution, both for residents and commercial operators, and most of all a safe one. The work will proceed hopefully in the next month or so, Travis, as we look to plan that site walk, and then following that, some discussions about proper processes for public noticed meetings on any affected exclusions or actions that this board may have to take. So we've got some work ahead of us, but things are proceeding. I'm quite happy with the right stakeholders. It was a great conversation, and I would like to offer my thanks to State Rep Carolyn Dykema, who was very instrumental in organizing the meeting. It was well done. Also on the call was a gentleman from Senator Spilka's office. We had some great representation on the call from the town. So moving on from my comments, we will ask anybody on the Zoom call if they have any public comments.
This is Rich Rosenberry, 66 Jarbrook Road.
Hi, Rich. How are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Excellent.
I sent the board an email, and I just wanted to reiterate my point that 2 weeks ago at the board meeting, there was some discussion about expanding the responsibilities of the Sustainable Waste and Recycling Committee. My personal opinion is that this is a good idea, and that perhaps reducing the carbon footprint of the town of Holliston would be one of those responsibilities. That's all I wanted to say. I hope the board takes this into consideration.
Thank you, Rich. Any comments on Rich's comment, Ben?
The only thing I would say is that I do share your desire to do that, to reduce the carbon footprint of the community. And I think we have a lot of work to do to get to some programming to get to that end, but I share your interest in doing that. I've certainly talked to Matt Zedek about it in several conversations over the past few weeks, and we're working on seeing what we can do to that end and what programs we can come up with. So, but thank you for the email as well.
Tina?
Rich, two things. One is I am looking for your charge for your committee. If you have a copy, I'd like you to forward it on to me. And also, I'm wondering if you will get a vote from your committee for proposed language change to the charge.
I will contact the members of the committee and see what I can come up with.
Okay.
I think that's a good start, Rich. We look forward to hearing from you. Send that along to Travis and Ms. Hine when you get a moment.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always good to hear from you, Rich. Thanks so much. Anything else? Anyone else? Public comment? We're going to move on. Comments from the town administrator.
Okay, I have a few things, but then the majority of my comments this evening will be under number 9 for the warrant discussion, so I'll try to be quick here. Next week, Monday, is Yom Kippur, so the board will not be meeting. We'll be meeting on 9/29. As was previously stated, we will have Rep. Dykema and Senator Spilka on our call. at which time we will discuss the timing of town meeting, potentially take a vote if the board feels it is advantageous to move that, and go through options that were previously discussed this evening. As was discussed earlier tonight by Mr. Cronin and Ms. Hine, I am making progress in reviewing all of the comments that came through the Lowland Industrial Park Forum on August 25th. We did have 29 comments from that forum, since we've also had 13 forms submitted through the TAC platform on the website. Thank you, Chris, for that information. And we've had significant numbers of emails that have come directly to me, to select board members, to departments that have been funneled to me. So right now, in addition to coming up with a next step document that was requested at the end of that forum by the select board, I'm also trying to weigh and make sure that all of those comments and feedback that we received from the public is summarized and in front of you when I get that to you, and I'm hoping to turn that around very quickly. The MassDOT conversation that was mentioned before, I don't think needs to slow that down. I think what I'll bring to you will just include the fact that we are continuing to work with MassDOT. I was asked to just give an update on the department head contracts. At this point, I believe everything is ready to go. The goals have been drawn up, and I can share those with you, but I'll be working with department heads to get those in place. I am looking to have one-year department head contracts for this year, with potentially going back to the 3-year format next year, but that'll be a long-term discussion. And the the stipend committee has its first meeting this Thursday. That group of 5, I will be joining them on Thursday to help them get set up. They will need to elect a chair and a clerk, at which point they can go on their way and do their business, but I will be with them for their initial meeting, which is Thursday night on Zoom. That is posted and on the website for anybody interested in that particular discussion. And lastly, I just wanted to point out, I think when I updated everybody last week on the unfortunate that we're losing Chris Canny as our building inspector, I don't think I provided enough context for that, because I've received some feedback that, we lost Chris in the middle of the night and those types of things, and he's just poof and he's gone. So obviously I did a bad job in communicating what happened there. Chris Canny has moved about an hour and a half away. He's done so for his family, and I wish him the best. And it's unfortunate. I think he did a great job for the town. At the same point, Chris is not actually gone yet. He is still very much helping the town. Actually, when I left the select board meeting last Monday night at about 9:30, I noticed the light on downstairs. I went downstairs and he was typing away, moving things along for residents who have permits. And so he is very much still working for the town. He's just unfortunately on hours that don't have him in the office in the normal 9 to 5 when you would see him. Actually, it was more like 7:30 to 4:30. But so he is doing work remotely as possible. He is coming in on the hours that he can give us. At the same point, his backup inspectors are doing work, and he is then as needed in the approval process, so that things keep moving along. But I just want everybody to understand that this was his personal move. That's the reason for the leaving, and that he's still helping us to get things done. And that we did, as I mentioned last week, we did post the position, and that is open through October 1st. At which point the screening committee that hired Chris, which was an excellent hire, we still have those individuals, and we will be getting that process going again. So I would just ask anybody who is needing to deal with the building department that right now, during the day we're a little short-staffed, but they're still getting to all of the work. So please either email or call and leave a message, and you'll get instructions, and you'll get reached out to very shortly. And that is all I have for the update at the moment.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for the town administrator from our friends on Zoom? We're going to now turn to our next item, DPW article update. Ben.
Yes. So this is why I didn't want to make public comment, because you're going to listen to me talk for a little bit. So this board asked me to look at some of the DPW articles that we had proposed. There was one about sidewalks, and there was two about the water system. So I've had some conversations with DPW director. I've certainly had many conversations with Travis, and I've also reached out to the DPW liaisons for the Finance Committee, Vin Murphy, who's on the call right now, and Michelle Zemer, who've been very responsive and helpful with some of their questions and ideas and things like that, and things to address. So I think, we're not, I wouldn't say we're all the way to where I'm 100% comfortable, but I can certainly share some of my thoughts and such about things. So I'll start with the sidewalk study. I don't think we're going to need to make any changes to the scope of the study as of that was released on March 26th. So the language that was released at that point, I believe it was in the it's in the packet that Travis sent over. So you can certainly see what that language looks like. But there I don't remember if we sent over both. So I'll just verify. Yeah, so there's one from September, but I'm looking at the language for March for this particular conversation, which starts on page 17. So I don't see any substantial changes from that language on 326 for the sidewalk study. The way I'm looking at it, the way I'm looking at it is to certainly look at it as a means to inventory what we have, look at identifying possible funding sources such as grants and such to offset any potential changes, replacements, upgrades, or filling in gaps that need to be made depending on location and nature of those changes or upgrades that need to be done. And part of this action is also looking towards giving some information towards the Complete Streets program. It's only one component within that particular project, but it is certainly a component within that could be beneficial for inclusion. One of the things that I want to do after this meeting is I'd like to reach out to some of the public, a couple of other boards. I'd like to talk to, and I think Tina has already certainly talked to them previously, but I want to talk to them again about that. It's going to be coming up as Friends of the Rail Trail, Council on Aging, and the schools to just sort of mention, hey, this is out here, this is coming up. Could you, we'd like to generate your support, and so if you have any questions and things like that, because I think it's important that we get some public facing, so that when we get to town meeting, there's some people who are aware of it and who can show some support at that particular time. So that's really all I have about the sidewalk study. Is there any questions, comments, thoughts about that particular
Tina,
study?
you go first.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the first thing I want to say is, residents should not think that the sidewalk study is going to result in a plan to sidewalk 90 plus miles of sidewalks in the town.
Absolutely not.
That one of the biggest benefits in my mind is identifying, after the inventory is done of what we actually have in place, identifying where connections can be made between not only existing sidewalks, but where we have connections to areas of services like the downtown, to areas of active recreation, passive recreation like the rail trail, and also where people live and would want to move, so to get from their home into the downtown, to get from their home to the schools. So I think that's one of the main things that the sidewalk study would do. The Complete Streets, there is some overlap, but only in the sense, in my mind at least, that the sidewalk inventory then becomes a document used in Complete Streets to generate project ideas within Complete Streets. Complete Streets takes us to a limited set of places with what we can do with it. Coming back to the sidewalk study, I think one of the biggest things is when you look at in my mind at least, when you look at the capital improvement plan as it exists prior to, let's just say, July 20th, sidewalks were mentioned once. and they were mentioned in the context of a piece of equipment that would clean the sidewalk. So one of the things that the sidewalk prioritization plan is going to do is create, and I'm going to read right here, develop budgetary pricing for prioritization of sidewalk improvement. So it's going to give us a plan on how, when, and where to spend to make the kinds of connections that provide residents greater and safer accessibility to the community around them. And that's really, in my mind, one of the biggest benefits. It's a strategic approach to spending money with a plan in place to get better, safer access for our residents. And the last thing that I will say is that it sets us up nicely for applying for other grant opportunities and for other state funding opportunities. Right now, we are at a disadvantage in that we don't have this inventory nor this prioritization plan for where we should be developing our sidewalks. We could add in the whole water main replacement piece. That is very important as well, but I think we've said that already, so I'll drop my comments there.
Well, I'll pick it up there. How's that?
Go for it.
One of the bullets, as you indicated, Ben, on this study does seek to draft a plan that overlaps with a 5-year plan for roadway or water improvement work. That's smart planning. You know, one of the reasons why we have a consolidated DPW is because for generations the town of Holliston had a water department and a public works department that worked in silos. They weren't coordinating their work to open up streets and repair things. Now they do. This takes that same element of good planning to the level where if we are constructing or putting in new water pipes, we're simultaneously thinking about whether or not that environment is part of a plan. Without a plan, you can't really execute it. So I think this is a critical part of what we're trying to achieve as a board to benefit the vision and overall enjoyment of our citizens in our town. It's always been something that I think this town has lacked. We seem to have sidewalks everywhere, but they don't go anywhere. So.
Well, I think one other thing, just as we were talking, I should mention also, is that as we talk about things like traffic, is being able to take people off the roads to be able to enjoy the community on foot. Safely, I think is important. I mean, not that I'm going to get a sidewalk in front of my house, but I mean, I live a little over a mile away, and yet I can't safely, it's difficult for me to walk. I have to take a car. So if there's places and ways that we can try to take some cars off the road and reduce some traffic, we can.
Sure.
I think that will certainly benefit people as well.
Now, in your work towards this this particular article or this item, what kind of collaboration have you had with our partners? You mentioned you still wanted to talk to a couple other boards. What about our friends on the Finance Committee who had some unanswered questions from last time we talked with them?
The main questions that I was getting was about the other articles, and they weren't asking so much about this particular one. There were some questions. We had a meeting, I think it was last week, with the Capital Subcommittee, and there were some questions about the sidewalks and things like that and how to complete streets fit in. And I think one of the things that I think is really critical, and you've said it, Tina, is that it is part of this process and part of this particular study is going to help us identify grants and funding opportunities for sidewalk replacement. It's not just simply let's pave everything. That's not what we're saying. That's not what it's doing. It's taking an inventory. It's seeing where we can be strategic when we do replace things, but also identifying possible opportunities to help us out to fund those particular initiatives. So the Finance Committee, they had some questions, but there weren't a huge number about this particular one. So. The other one has a lot more questions and a lot more conversation.
Well, to the extent that we offer or share any new information with them, I strongly encourage that.
Yes, yes. I mean, that's certainly the liaisons and have been fully briefed and aware of it, and Travis has certainly been integral to the process. So some questions that have come his way, he's certainly been.
Yeah, one question was I had a number of $50,000. The quote is for 40. That seems to have been my mistake or transposition in numbers. So I've corrected this back to the $40,000 number that is related to the quote received.
Okay.
And that's the placeholder that I'm holding as of now. I mean, obviously, as we're going forward and approving warrant articles to go to the FinCom, we can take a look at that again, but 40,000 is the number that I have now.
That's the number that I have from the March 26th study. So list of studies. So.
What's next, Ben?
So the second part, and I've sort of put these, there's two studies that I'm sort of putting together in this particular, in the next piece, which is basically it's referred to in the March 26th list of studies as, I want to get the Water Main Improvements Plan. And then the second piece is the water supply planning.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I'm looking at this, I've had a couple conversations with Sean Reese about this, and he sort of crystallized sort of a thought process that I've had, which is basically thinking about this as water modernization, is looking to modernize our system, is to do more than just simply replacing the pipes, but to make sure that the system can handle the distribution and the quality that the residents expect and require.
And exercising of valves that's coming.
Yes.
Some regulatory issues.
Yes, and that's a big piece of it too. So just getting into the sort of to get a little more into the weeds of it is that we've talked a lot about the pipes, but one of the things that Sean brought up is that the state is mandating that we exercise the valves, I guess is the term that he used, and he mentioned that some of the valves we're not sure if we exercise them, if we can put them back, basically. So we want to make sure that we can identify if valves need to be replaced, or do we need to be more strategic in the placement of some of those valves, so that way if you have a water main break, you don't have to shut off half the town to fix it, for example. And being strategic in valve placement, I think, is a piece that we hadn't necessarily discussed, but I think is important because it helps us to be able to do work on the system effectively without with minimal or less disruption than could be required.
May I interrupt for one
of
second?
Course,
I'm so sorry. I've got the 2010 study open here, the one that's referenced often as why don't we do more with. So when I look at this, I do a search for valves.
I don't find anything.
Nothing's
There's no
coming
language
up.
about valves in that study. That's one of the reasons why we need this new study, is to be able to identify and to do some work to find and identify those valves.
All right, and you're saying from a regulatory standpoint, we need to be caring for, maintaining, I don't know the right words to use, whatever it was that you just said, we need to be addressing both our gate valves and our isolation valves. We don't have any study that tells, do we need to know where they are? And we don't know where they are?
No, so I wouldn't say that we don't know where they are. I think the issue is that as the regulatory body comes in and says, we want you to be exercising this many valves for this period of time and prove that you're doing this as a best practice, that there are valves, and this is not a Holliston specific issue, this does exist everywhere, just so people are aware, but when you go in and exercise a valve that hasn't been touched in 50 years, the expectation is not necessarily that it's going to be a quick on and off and you're going to be all set. And so I think planning that strategically so that as we go through that exercise, especially if it's mandated, that we're not causing more issues for ourselves than we want to.
Okay.
And then another piece of that, sorry to interrupt you, just one more piece that I wanted to bring up too, is that the system as the way it's described is sort of like a hand. There's lots of dead ends, and we want to see if there's places and ways that we can create loops that might improve the quality in some of those locations. And so part of this exercise is to also not only to replace the existing pipes, but to see if there's other places that we can complete loops in order to improve the quality and parts of the community. So that's part of what is being asked from this particular initiative. And then finally, of course, is the water sourcing, is to be able to start looking to see where we could build wells. That's a process that takes time, and we need to be able to start working on doing things like that. We are going to be, again, that's another thing the state is going to ask us to do, is to be able to identify additional sources for wells. And so we need to be ready and need to be working towards that goal as well. So,
Ben, with respect to the water main improvement plan, is the work that you just described regarding exercising the valves and identifying where the valves are, that's complementary and now to be added to the existing description that was drafted in March of 2020, or are you Is this a whole new description?
So when I spoke to Sean, actually earlier today, he mentioned that the existing language would include looking at the valves within the study that we have.
So in other words, keep the existing description of the work that was projected to be 40,000 for water main
Yes.
improvement plan. In and of that, they would
Part of
specifically
this
identify-
exercise would be to identify
Sure.
valves that need replacement, and if any new valves need to be added to the system.
And I completely support the idea that we should be starting a search for a new well for the water supply. So my other question on this is similar to the one that I asked on the earlier item. How much collaboration do we have with the Finance Committee on the development of what we're looking to do here?
I've had substantial back and forth, even as late as today, with members of the Finance Committee. They asked a lot of good questions to clarify the scope of this particular study, to ensure that we're not just sort of, going over the same things and doing the same things without getting, additional value. So basically, this study, the point is this study is building off of the 2010 study. We know where the pipes are, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that the system we have an idea of like how strategically we want to replace the pipes, the speed with which we want to do it, like looking at different funding models on pipe replacement, but also looking at other assets within the network, and thinking about how water main breaks or changes to the system, with additional assets that have been added since the 2010 study, how they impact it, and how we are using the things like wells and treatment plants. Are we using them differently? Were they on for 8 hours before, but now they're on for 24 hours? So how does that impact the pipes in the system? So it's sort of trying to look at it holistically to see the impact, but it's taking that existing 2010 data and building off of it, and it's not just
Harnessing. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons why the cost would be lower. If we tried to do this all soup to nuts, it would have been higher, but we already have existing data to work with.
Any questions on that, Tina?
No, I do not.
You say no?
No,
Okay.
no questions.
Then I wanted to clarify my own remarks. I suggested that the water supply planning project, I'm all in favor of finding a new well. This particular study does not do that. To read what is written, it's a little bit more of a macro approach to well sourcing. The purpose is to evaluate the current sources of supply and identify if there are any anticipated shortfalls in our water supply over a 20-year planning horizon. So that means they're going to be examining existing aquifers and other sources for water supply,
Okay.
and then moving in the direction of using hydrological investigations and data from well drawdowns to paint a picture of how the town of Holliston can be positioned to secure additional water resources, possibly in the form of a new well, which is beyond the scope of this.
Okay.
That's the way I read it anyway. Right? We have a question from Zoom.
Carol, I think.
Hi, Carol Corey, 40 Bullitt Street.
Hi, Carol. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
I have a lot of things on my mind, but in particular, I don't want to back up to other things, but with the water, has anyone ever, I know there's so many people in Holliston right now that are digging their own private wells, which of course affect the aqua system that we're already on. And as these wells are being continually done privately, A, how is that affecting the town water wells? B, are we still just going to hand out any permit to anybody who wants to have a private well without regard to the fact that they're tapping in? We know we already have a problem with private wells because they continue to water even if there's a water ban, because there's no way we can monitor that, nor does the water ban pertain to them. So we're sitting in the middle of a drought right now, and I look at my neighbor across the street who continues to water her lawn. And so do many others who have these private wells, which again is just draining from the town in general. Does Holliston plan on addressing any of these issues, or is this just something that we're going to continue to allow anyone and everybody who wants to have a private well to have one?
So, great question, Carol. What I'd ask our town administrator to do would be to follow up with our DPW director and ask him to produce a response that we can bring back at a future meeting, Travis.
Sure.
Regarding well water applications, the status of well water applications in Holliston, and any restrictions or concerns we might have towards them. Carol, I will tell you, about a month ago, I think, we had Sean in to talk about Holliston's water condition with respect to the water ban and the drought. As you probably know, Hallston draws from the Charles River watershed, and our aquifers are fed from it. We have strict controls placed on our draw through that system. He expressed no deep concerns that the aquifers were in distress. We were under some restrictions from the state on how much we could draw from those sources. So while I hear you, and I can't say I blame you for being concerned about private well water draw from the aquifers, it doesn't seem to be a concern that was previously addressed by Mr. Reese so much as the amount being drawn from that source. It's obviously a finite resource. I understand what you're saying, but we didn't hear any alarms when he came before us about a month ago regarding the aquifers' capacity. It was really how much we could draw during a drought. We'll try to get you a better answer at an upcoming meeting regarding the well water application process and all that it brings. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that would be great. Could I just ask a couple more questions from previous things that I should have raised my hand on but didn't?
No objection. Go right ahead.
Okay. On the special town meeting on the 26th, which obviously we don't know when it's going to be now, what is that for? Is it a mandated meeting? Is it something that, I mean, I'm just thinking of COVID, and if we're stuffing like some 200 people into a building, what effect does that have on the overall town and the health conditions of the overall town?
Sure. So as Chief Cassidy you might have heard him explain, our charter calls for either a special or a fall town meeting. Traditionally, that meeting falls during the second half of the calendar year for the town to sort of clean up any financial business left over from the annual town meeting and address forthcoming needs, typically in the form of capital expenditures that are before us. The meeting is primarily pulsed about 6 months apart from the annual town meeting, and it allows us the chance to self-govern in things that generally affect us. Currently, we're tracking about 19 articles of work and business that the town needs to attend to. Notwithstanding your concerns about COVID, which I think is always on our minds, we feel compelled to try and pull off the town's business in a safe and very efficient manner. I'll bring you back to July when we delayed our annual town meeting for those purposes, but when we did conduct our work, it was done with great efficiency and attention to public health. I know Chief Cassidy mentioned that one of the factors, Carol, that they brought into that meeting was contact tracing. Every individual that went to town meeting was registered, so in the event that somebody gets sick, we could associate their relationship with anybody who might have attended town meeting. From that, we can report there were no positives from that meeting. The folks who were in charge of making sure that the public could assemble safely to do the town's business did a phenomenal job. I'm not sure if you went or not, but I can tell you from my observation, the social distancing, the seating, the environment was just phenomenal. So I felt very comfortable, yet I do know we do have a pandemic and we have to be sensitive to that. When and if we do schedule a special town meeting or reschedule it, it'll be first and foremost with public health at stake. So you bring up a good point, but at the same time, I think we're elected to carry on the town's business, and we'll try to do so with all of those factors in mind.
Okay. No, just concern. I mean, I myself would not attend, but just checking.
Gotcha.
And lastly, to the town administrator, I know you're doing the study of the lowland traffic, and when do you think that study would wrap up? Was it about a month from now, or sooner, or?
I think the board was expecting an update probably next week, and then, as Mr. Cronin mentioned, with the fact that we will be hosting Mass DOT for a site visit within the next month, I think that would lead to probably the final sort of update before action's taken by the board. That sound good?
Will that report be sent out to residents, or is it just something that the board would have?
I think, quite frankly, Carol, and you're a little ahead of us, so I'm just peeking
Okay,
ahead.
Mark.
I would envision another public meeting to discuss that. There was tremendous interest, obviously, on that topic, and we want to make sure our citizens feel like we're responsive to those needs. So, yeah, I would think that when we get ready to talk about what direction we're heading in, we're going to have another public hearing about it, and then we'll work towards the resolutions. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate
No,
it.
my pleasure. Great
Thank you, Carol.
questions. All right. All right, moving on. Ben, any other updates for the articles?
Nope, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I'd like to, like I said, I'd like to have the sidewalk study be a particular article, and I'd like to have a second article that has both of the water studies.
Bundled, yeah.
Bundle it as like a water modernization article.
When you bundle those, does that mean they would potentially be funded from water retained earnings? Is that one of the?
Yes, it would be funded
tactics?
that way, and I think we would address the language that that approval would be for two studies,
Yeah,
a
this-
study for each.
Got it.
The language within the warrant article would make it clear that what the scope of what we're trying to study would be,
Right.
to allow us to engage potentially more than one engineer if that were necessary, or if one engineering firm could do both.
Right.
Got it. Any other questions for Ben, Tina?
Just the cost there, Ben, for the two. So you've got two studies in one?
Yeah, so
What do you
the cost from 326, and in my conversations with Sean, he feels comfortable that we can do everything that I described under the 40,000 for the water main replacement study. So it would be 55,000 for the entire article.
Okay,
So the
so I
water-
had 75.
Yeah, I told you to put in that number, but after talking, but that was contingent on me talking to Sean, and he answered me today
Okay.
to say the 55.
So one question I received was within that scope of the 40,000, it did not mention specifically the valve conversation that you had with Sean. Do you feel like that's comfortably within the 55,000 overall? Before
Yes,
I drop the number?
I mean, and I think, you know, I might want to follow up with the
Erica.
engineer, just
Yeah.
to make sure, but Sean did indicate that he feels.
I
he
think
thinks
it does, based on what
I
I
think
was
it does
reading.
too, because it does talk about water assets.
It did, yep.
So I think that would certainly fall within the purview, but I think we could just follow up and confirm to make sure that I'm
Sure.
not speaking out of turn there.
Right.
Great. So yeah, I've been carrying a placeholder of 75, so if everybody's comfortable, when I just need the word and I can drop that to 55?
Yeah,
And the other one is 40.
the other one still says 40.
40, yep.
So Ben, as always, thanks, great work. I strongly encourage collaboration, communication with the Finance Committee. They were very involved in the prior efforts to bring this to the town's attention, and I think it's our goal, it should be our goal to make sure their questions are answered before we get to town meeting.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I've been working very closely with them to try to, certainly the liaisons at this point, and I've had some preliminary
Right.
conversations with the Capital Improvement Committee as well, so.
Great. All right. Hearing any other comments from the Zoom call on DPW article update? Hearing none. Warrant discussion, this time with Travis Ahern.
All right. Chris, I sent you a brief just summary to go off of if somebody's watching from home. All right. So this is what I'm looking at the moment that I'm working on language for. So the top six you'll see are not in red. Those are the standard bearers. So the stabilization fund, this is to fund the stabilization fund. Not to use money from it. So generally speaking, at the moment, $400,000 was used at the annual town meeting in July, and we would be looking to, at the very least, make the stabilization fund whole within the fiscal year to show that we were not supporting our operating budget through the stabilization fund. I think we'll be able to do that. We do not have free cash certified yet. Certainly that number, I believe, will be able to do that. As well as the overlay that I discussed with you previously of $484,000 could make that fund whole entirely. I'm not prepared to make that as a recommendation to you at this time because there are still quite a few moving parts, but that is an option that I'm looking at. under Article 1. Under Article 2, this is to fund the capital expenditure fund. Article 4 would be the one that sort of taps into it. Article 2 is to fund it. So we would look at essentially where the select board chooses to go with Article 4 and capital budget. Have discussions in the coming weeks with the Finance Committee. And at that point, we would want to make sure that Article 2 funds the CapEx fund to leave us in the position, considering also what happens later within the warrant articles, to leave us in good position and in compliance with our finance policies. Article 3, sale of surplus equipment. This is one that is recurring but has not been used recently. Article 4, the capital budget. I would be happy to go through all of these items, but what I think we may want to do is just get through this list, and then if we feel like you have time and you want to be here till 10, then I can certainly do that, or I can always bring it back. Article 5, fund transfer to affect the tax rate. Again, this is a recurring one, has not been used in recent years that I was able to see. Article 6, the community preservation fund. I would just mention that the CPC has their public hearing on 9/23. I'm aware of 3 items that are coming forth from the facilities manager, 2 having to do with this building, which is the windows and the grand hall floor upstairs. I know that he has presented those to the CPC. This is the public hearing on that. Additionally, he presented a project to fix the facade at the library. That, again, he will be bringing back to the public hearing. And I believe also there will be something coming forward from potentially the Blair Square Committee to the CPC, and Ben could highlight us on that, or is that more for next week?
Yeah, we're working on trying to put something together because the Friends of the Rail Trail put $5,000 towards a public. I don't want to use the wrong language there, but a public. Presentation and information collection for the project, and then the idea of the CPC would be funding. I think it's around $48,000 to build to put together construction plans for a future project at Blair Square.
And so,
Travis, as you are going through these articles, are you keeping in the back of your mind which ones might fit under a consent agenda?
I can certainly start to think
Yeah,
about
I was going to say, if you're not,
We love that at the
so
July
right now
town meeting.
I'm focused on presenting you with the information. If everybody's on board with a number of these, and I haven't sort of had the further follow-up conversations with the Finance Committee, if we find a few that have a consensus, absolutely, I can start to tick those off.
begin to consolidate them as one.
Absolutely.
It was an effective tool, I think, at the ATM.
Well, you look at 3 and 5 there.
So the special town meeting at last year, just as a comparison, had 20 articles. The 20th was a citizen's petition, and I'm actually eyeing, I won't get into tonight, but I have received overtures that there may be one this year. So there were 20. Right now I'm working on 14, and I'll discuss 3 placeholders that I have at the moment. After that, and I can start to tick off what could be bundled, certainly. Okay, so that's the Community Preservation Fund. After that, this is where we're sort of getting into discussion that I'm putting together warrant language. Some of these already have the language at least drafted. Some of them are still in progress as I need to hear from council or others. But let me get into sort of the projects that haven't necessarily been discussed overly in public. The roadway drainage sidewalk. This is related to drainage sidewalk roadway rehabilitation on Spring, School, Exchange, Union, Mechanic, and Pleasant Streets, also known as the Mudville neighborhood. The scope of work includes new catch basins, manholes, drainage piping, and related infrastructure, sidewalks, granite curbing, and road reclamation. This is essentially what Tom Smith and Sean Reese have identified as not being able to, the balance of what they cannot cover through Chapter 90 and or their own budget capital. So they've come to the number, and there's quite a bit of analysis that's gone into it to say to finish the project and get it all done, $343,000 would be needed to finish that entire scope. Again, all of that will be written out in the warrant language, and we can certainly get into it now if you'd like. Or I can keep going down the list?
Keep going.
Okay. The next one, number 9, is the Water System Modernization Plan. That was just highlighted by Ben. The next one is the water main replacements, Winter Street. This is the annual effort to get through miles of water mains and pipes. $2.8 million is the number on this. That is an escalation that we've seen in the market for replacing water mains and pipes. So $2.8 million now covers about 2 miles. That is an escalation from about $1 million a mile. There's a number of reasons for that. The materials that we're using to make this the useful life as long as possible is part of what we're seeing. That would cover Winter Street, again 2 miles, and all of that will be in the warrant language.
Is there a sidewalk associated with that work?
They will finish everything, the street and any related sidewalk will be part of the project to make sure that everything sort of is in impeccable shape when they're done. Not adding anything, but certainly if there were sidewalk there. I'm not familiar with the area.
I don't think,
Still
when I
in
talked to
my-
Sean, I think he mentioned, I don't think they're adding, I don't think there's a sidewalk, and I don't think they're adding one.
So that would be a terrible omission, in
Yeah,
my
I-
opinion.
Well,
Okay.
yeah.
I have contacted Sean. I will contact him again. I don't know how much detail to get into right now, but I'll just briefly say that a resident approached who is in a butter, who lives on Winter Street, who owns 3 parcels of land, or whose family owns 3 parcels of land, and who is willing to have a conversation with the town about offering up some of that frontage for sidewalks on Winter Street. It's a big conversation because it's a complicated project, but I have shared it with Sean, and I will follow up with Sean to see how far he's taken it.
Yeah, in terms of opportunity, Travis, when we talk about scheduling water line replacement work like that with sidewalk infrastructure, that's like a great example. Winter Street's it's a beautiful street. It's a long, old designed road that connects neighborhoods to the center of town. If one could envision a sidewalk throughout, it would be a wonderful pedestrian experience that really by itself becomes sort of the exhibit of what we're trying to achieve, I think, through our vision. So I think through Ms. Hine, some additional communication with our public works folks about what it would take to achieve that is something we should be asking.
I am sending you the email right now.
Okay. In the scope,
Do you have any comment on that?
No,
Okay, sorry.
that's fine.
in the scope, I do not see sidewalks identified, so I will follow up on that. Winter Street, just, as we're talking about prioritization and things of that nature, is sort of the next priority when it comes to replacing miles. I will follow up on this sidewalk conversation specifically.
Just as an aside, I'm always curious as to find out why Winter Street. I mean, that's part of the reason why we need this water pipe replacement plan, like who selected Winter and why, and, I'm sure it's very valuable and needed, but it would be nice to have a plan, Mr. Sparrow, about if Winter is this year, what's next year kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the intention of that study.
So go ahead,
part of
Travis,
it.
sorry.
So the next project is one that we're all familiar with, the water treatment plant. This is approaching final design. It's at 95% complete design. The original appropriation in May of 2018 was a borrowing authorization for $8.375 million. At 95% design, the engineer and Sean Reese are looking for an additional appropriation of $1 million. They have presented information, which I've also forwarded to the Finance Committee, and I will discuss with them tomorrow night and bring any of their feedback back to you next week, which is an itemized cost of why $1 million has escalated since 2018 to what is now being considered essentially construction costs estimated for mid-22 when this project is estimated to be complete. Most of the $1 million has to do with a cost adjustment for construction costs. There are also some things on here, so $634,000 of the $1 million would be the construction cost adjustment. Included in there is things that in 2018 were sort of foreign to anybody who was designing a project like this, including things like tariffs on steel. There have been also some changes to scope related to DEP feedback. Lining of lagoons is $65,000, an aerator is $100,000. Additionally, a bathroom. This is an unoccupied station, so a bathroom was added, one gender-neutral bathroom. is on there, those types of things, adds up to $1 million. The way that Sean has proposed this is to use water retained earnings, the balance of which is $1.4 million plus. But that is not the only option. There are a few funding mechanisms that we can discuss tonight with the Finance Committee tomorrow, and then at future meetings with the Select Board before the article is put together. Essentially, increasing the borrowing authorization would be one way to go. If the bids come in low, we've essentially affected nothing, right? We don't actually borrow for that cost necessarily. Identifying the appropriation through retained earnings is also possible, as that balance is there. I believe with the financial policy, that would not be out of whack with the balance that it would leave, but that would tie up $1 million of that retained earnings. I believe the Finance Committee mentioned either before I came in meetings that I had previously seen or since I've been in, I'm trying to remember, and I will discuss it with them tomorrow, potentially using CapEx on this. That's a little bit, the capital expenditure fund, that's a little bit uncommon in other towns, but in this town, that might be, a way to go if that's where people want to. It's sort of commingling funds, which is general fund with water enterprise fund. At the same point, the discussion can always be had if, a ratepayer is a ratepayer is a taxpayer. So three sort of ideas that can work. The article could be written in a way that essentially leaves that up to town meeting. The article could be written in a way, if we find a consensus. I have the borrowing authorization language from bond counsel, and so we can discuss that. But as of right now, 95% design. Sean Reese and the engineer are saying $1 million is needed more to complete this project going into bids. If bids come in lower, we're obviously in better position, but this would allow us to get the project done on the schedule, which is in the best interest of the town. And I appreciate the work that he put into this analysis. And I will discuss this again with the Finance Committee tomorrow night and come back to you in the coming weeks.
Any questions, Ben?
Nope.
Tina?
No.
My only comment is, $1 million above what was authorized captures one's attention. After reviewing the numbers, it appears that the factors driving all of that were beyond that which could have been expected in May of 2018. Factors that you just described that are more market-driven through influences such as tariffs or DEP regulations and so forth. It's regrettable that the project cost may be going in that direction, but I was satisfied that the information that was shared seemed to draw from the fact that it was unforeseen. We could not have planned for these things. It's still a lot. Hopefully, we've got 95% estimation, a good enough number to go out to bid reasonably, and then hopefully capture some market gain. So. Thank you very much for that update. Anything else?
Yeah, so just getting through the last few here, stormwater management, this is relatively recurring. This is us keeping up with the MS4 permit. This is, for anybody not familiar with the MS4 permit, a prime example of unfunded mandates from the federal government. It's work that absolutely needs to be done, but no city and town is sort of prepared necessarily to be dealing with it. Everybody pays for stormwater in different ways. Usually if a town has a sewer enterprise fund, that's how they're paying for stormwater. In a town that doesn't have sewer, you're left to the tax levy. At this point, luckily, where we are in the MS4 is staying up to date with design and reporting to DEP. And so at this point, what we're doing with this is continuing to pay for design engineering services that keep us in compliance. CEI Engineering is the firm that we've been using, although of course we would need to bid again, so I just put that here for reference. 94,000 is roughly where we're looking at right now, but I would just say I'm using that currently as a placeholder as well. We're looking to refine that. $94,000 is a quote that we received that is essentially a menu. You go through that, you say here's what we absolutely need to hit our guidelines with DEP for the coming 18 months. And then we would refine that number and budget what we need.
Is the expectation that that's going to basically be on the warrant? Or we're going to be looking at that for
not necessarily on an annual basis, but at a very least biannually. And at some point, what the MS4 is designed to do is say, now that you've identified through all these studies what you need to do, go out and fund these projects. And a lot of that is culvert work, which sometimes we need to be doing anyway, and sometimes it's not something that we would have otherwise prioritized.
Sure.
At the same point, stormwater management is in the best interest of sustainability.
Right.
There is
Absolutely.
certainly a need for it. It's just that, some of these things get forced on us and aren't necessarily our choice,
Right.
and happen at times that aren't necessarily advantageous for the community, related to other budget shortfalls.
Well, I guess, just a question, in general is like, is there ways that we could maybe look to try to planning this a little bit more long-term beyond, I mean, not, obviously not in this particular warrant, but maybe in the future, maybe for future years to try to plan out how this works, or if there's ways that, we can get any economies of scale from doing more work, or any kinds of things like that, just like in the future, and is there something that we can possibly do to try to do that, or is it just something that we're just going to have to accept that's coming every 18 months or 2 years or whatever?
It's something that we're going to have to pay for. The way that this town chooses to pay for it now and into the next decade is a conversation that we can have, even with a placeholder I have on here tonight to discuss with briefly. The way that this town is going to pay for stormwater infrastructure is to be determined. One potential solution that a number of towns have come up with is a stormwater fee. You essentially charge people for impervious area of their property. It is not well viewed by the towns who have done them, but it is a necessity. Otherwise, it would have been essentially a Prop 2.5 override or something like that. Chicopee is the example that's coming to mind right now, and but there are others. I think Millis, but within the MWRA, I know we had 4 communities who adopted it rather than continue to charge it to their sewer enterprise fund. My thought here, and something that we can discuss into the future, is when we have revenues coming in related to sustainability, energy, this is something that is in the best interest environmentally for the town, and that is potentially a funding mechanism that we may need to look at rather than the rain tax, which is how it's been referred to in New Jersey, where it is very common now as well.
Okay.
But it's MS4 is not going away. How we choose to pay for it is going to be the conversation we'll be having.
It should be at some point. We should probably have a larger conversation about this
Absolutely.
and this particular project. Okay.
This is about compliance. Projects will be coming, and at that point, we'll need to be ready.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
9 Green Street Design Engineering. I have a grant application in for this. I don't have high hopes, but also we can't really wait. We need to come up with a plan. James Keast and I are trying to get quotes. We should have them by the end of this week to know what this will cost. I don't think the cost is going to be exorbitant. I'm holding $40,000 as a placeholder at the moment because all of these studies seem to be about $40,000. No, I'm just kidding. The design engineering costs should be that or less, and that is, I believe the scope is out there and we've discussed previously. But essentially, what we need to know is how to remove the structure safely if that's going to be the case. How to deal with stormwater on the site, as there are some environmental aspects here that we need to make sure we're diverting water where we want it to go, and then sort of costing out the idea of what this is going to be in the long run. I know what came up at the capital subcommittee was that at some point there was a plan to essentially get this into good standing with DEP and then put it back out on the market. I don't know if that is necessarily where we go, but we can't sort of do anything until we have an idea of what it's going to cost to deal with this property.
The individual who raised that comment was on the 9 Green Street Committee?
No,
Okay.
it was mentioned to me by somebody on the capital subcommittee.
Okay. Yeah,
I did get forwarded by James Keast, who talked to somebody on the 9 Green Street Committee, the sort of final report that they came out with, which was sort of more, this would be advantageous to be a parking lot which could service the library, downtown, and Goodwill Park, which was my understanding coming in, but it was good to hear that there was another sort of thought process that I should be considering going forward. So that's now on my radar, but at the same point, this design and engineering is needed because right now we were, if anybody was listening to the police calls, removing youths from the roof of the building. We are securing it. The structure has deficiencies. The town needs to deal with it, and sort of the outcome of what it will be can be determined, but this is a necessary step.
Got it. Next.
The public safety signs and equipment, this is a TAC conversation, which I currently have a placeholder of $40,000 related to the need for signage and equipment. Because we have two people who sit on TAC, I won't try to step on it. I've written up a bit of a description, and I'll be looking for more information from them. But essentially, TAC has started to listen to or started to have hearings from residents. A lot of that is to say there is some signage that would absolutely be helpful, but the budget of $1,000 within the DPW budget is really just to replace signs that are broken, worn, maintain, essentially, right? So this would be identifying the fact that capitalizing the need for signage would be helpful to allow TAC to respond to some of these complaints. Additionally, equipment, and Ms. Hine would probably be better at describing some of the equipment that's being looked at by the police chief and TAC as a whole, how it would benefit the ability of the traffic advisory committee to respond to residents.
I'm happy to update the board next Tuesday. We are meeting on Thursday, and we will have as an agenda item to discuss this article
Absolutely.
and equipment. So.
Okay, so that was the final one. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's it. No, all
I
good.
will make sure that's on for next week. And so the three placeholders I want to discuss, a previous discussion on establishing a revolving fund for the solar revenue. I had two conversations today. One was with town council and one was with Jim Crawley, the tax council for DLS. Those conversations were really about me trying to, I've dealt with a lot of these different funds in a lot of different ways and sort of looking at the mechanics of what we're looking at, the revenue sources. I think it's both conversations solidified that what we're probably looking at is an article in May. That a special town meeting is not necessarily the time to establish this. May will still allow us to do everything that we need to do. The conversation is going to come down to a revolving fund, which has obviously boundaries and guardrails that are set up. We have other revolving funds. People understand the concept of it. It's a pretty straightforward thing, but it is programmatic. So what we would be describing is the program that would be run by that. Another solution potentially is an enterprise fund. Again, we have experience with the Water Enterprise Fund. It would we would be setting up essentially the Department of Sustainability and a conversation I think we started earlier with Mr. Rosenberry. I think that all of these things can tie in together, but the vetting of that article is going to be more on the May timeline. Part of that is to do with DLS being comfortable with that. My pushback to them was, as we heard from Beth Greenblatt, that project, the way that project is lined up, when the NTP hits, the town will be receiving 25% of the first lease payment, and that may happen before the end of this fiscal year. Ideally, I would like to have that fund in place by that time. The gentleman from DLS did point out that a May annual town meeting still would potentially allow us sort of the cleanup that happens at the end of the fiscal year, and then we're on board for FY22. So that is where we are with that. I think a lot of conversation should be had, but I don't want to get bogged down in everything we have right now.
Yeah.
So also a placeholder I have is for the septic discussion. We have been in conversation with the church here regarding an easement. If we were to reach an agreement on that, we would need a separate article on that easement, including any dollar value that may go to the church in that conversation. So I have a placeholder there. Based on our previous conversations with the governance committee, I'm holding a placeholder there, although I've seen no language. And I have heard from one individual on a potential citizen's petition, which I will obviously bring to you if that hits my desk. And any other articles out there for anybody listening are due by October 1st at 4 o'clock. If next week or in the future the select board chooses to extend out from October 26th, I would then bring back to the board to reopen the warrant so that people had an extended period to bring anything forward. But that is where I am at the moment. I think Article 4 would be good for next week, maybe. It's up to you, though.
Please consider adding a placeholder for traffic management. We don't know.
I'm sorry. I do have the
Yeah, I was
traffic
gonna
engineering
say.
study placeholder. I apologize. I didn't mention that one.
Okay. And
And so I would need, because that was mentioned at our September 14th meeting. So where I am with that today, I had a conversation with Karen Sherman, and on, some of our professional sort of email chains, people go back and forth, ask for information. So somebody else is looking for a similar study, which is going to be, right now we do a lot of traffic engineering when a development comes to town through the planning board process. They need to do traffic studies. Then we have them pay for our peer review of those studies, those types of things. But for the town to actually perform its own traffic engineering, we don't really have a mechanism or funding source for that at the moment. So I'm looking for a cost of that, which I'll bring back to you next week.
Great. The other one was, we had talked, I recall mentioning these to you, Travis. I don't have a strong recollection of where we left off with the 4 dams in Holliston. There was some outputs at previous town meetings. I just don't want to lose sight of the urgency of addressing those. And to the extent that we need any town approvals or finances, don't lose sight of that.
So 45,000 was approved last year. I sat down with Matt Zedek and Ryan Clapp recently. I also asked Ms. Hine for her recollection and any there. And Mr. Clapp has reached out to Karen Fung, who used to do dam work for the town, to collect all that information. So we've sort of compiled everything. There is also in the environmental bond bill from 2018 $1 million, which we're going to pursue, sort of dealing with. The $45,000 dealt with a lot, but it included sort of identifying which dams are our responsibility. There is one, for example, Lake Winthrop is a great pond, which technically makes it DCR's responsibility. There is discussions that DCR didn't want it to be their responsibility. Those types of things. But absolutely, it's on my radar.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the warrant? Go ahead, Tina.
Can I just jump in and say for the tentative Article 15 traffic engineering Lowland Hoppingbrook, are you thinking you're looking for input from planning in terms of development issues, or are you thinking that you want input more from the Traffic Advisory Committee in terms of like petitions that we received, or a blending of the two? Like in terms of developing that article for traffic engineering, where or do you see taking comments and feedback and input from? Because they're kind of, in a way, they're two different things. One from the development side of things, and then one from resident concerns and traffic mitigation concerns.
Yes, so TAC would be good. I have this on here after feedback from the select board. So I would be happy to have feedback from anybody while I develop the scope of the warrant article. The idea that I have in here in terms of why I sort of referenced Lowland Industrial and Hoppingbrook is, again, as new developers are sort of discussing Hoppingbrook, there's the opportunity for traffic engineering to be done through not our cost. At the same point in the Lowland Industrial Park, there's sort of less of that opportunity. So when discussing with the select board, which we'll be doing in the coming weeks, potential heavy motor vehicle exclusions. It is necessary to provide MassDOT with counts. It is necessary to sort of do a number of things that we can't do in-house. And so in my mind, sort of that would present the select board with the opportunity to respond to should we and then can we pursue whether it be exclusions, weight restrictions, those types of things. We would then have the ability to engage somebody to do the work that is necessary that we can't do in-house.
Certified, by the way. Certified work. Done by a...
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You good?
Yeah, we will talk about this more, I'm sure, so I'll save my feedback for
that's
a later
what I have at the
conversation.
moment. TAC would be great.
Okay.
All right.
If we can put that on the
Do you have any
agenda.
questions? You said you're good.
I'm good.
Okay, you're good. Vin, I think you have a question for Mr. Ahern.
I do have a question. He mentioned certified free cash. What are the concerns if they actually are not going to certify free cash? What's the timeline? I feel it was slow. Are they backed up to normal and we expect to get it certified sometime in late October, or are we going to be going to town meeting still not have certified free
I believe I had a conversation with Andrew Nelson, who's sort of our rep's rep, just to sort of ask where they are, and he sees no delays. I think if we were to pursue October 26th town meeting, we would have a free cash certification by that point. I can't guarantee that, obviously, but that's the understanding that I have.
Okay, great. That was my only question.
Thanks, Vin. All right, hearing no other questions, we'll move on with our agenda for board business.
And you can breathe now, by the way.
Mr. Ahern, if you
Nope.
could give us an
Nope.
update on town hall doors contract.
Yes, we received 3 bids, and I have written up a letter here to award that to the lowest responsive bidder, who is New England School. I wanted to give that to you. I think my understanding is in the past the select board has voted on these types of contracts. I don't know legally if that's necessary, but I want to be safe, and I also want you updated because this has been a long coming contract to be awarded. So I have in here the letter, but I would also take action from the board just to approve the contract for the town hall doors.
Can you give us numbers?
Yes, I'm sorry, that
52,100.
52,100, and I could give you the
New England School Services.
Yeah, New England School Services out of Medford, Mass. for 52,100. The other 2 bids came in at 65,660 and 85,500.
And we have sufficient funds to carry the 52,100.
We do. There were 2 warrant articles. The initial amount and the second amount totals $53,000. So we will have sufficient funds. Also, the New England School Services has the longest warranty of any of the 3 proposals at 3 years.
Does this include new electronic access for the doors, or is that separate?
It does
Travis?
not include electronic access, but I don't know why I just said include that, but it's getting late. James Keast is looking at, with the work that they're doing, to make sure that he then has the ability to pursue electronic access afterwards. This is going to help him do that. Right now, he would not be able to do that with our current situation. So this will not include the electronic access, but it will allow him to pursue it.
One area that you may want to talk to Chief Cassidy about is the possibility of seeking CARES Act money to fund that. During the COVID pandemic, we've restricted access to Town Hall. It is not an open, free public space as it had been. We are now asking for appointments and/or restricted public access. So we'll see if that kind of justification passes the test, given the COVID situations. But other than that, I will entertain a motion to approve the awarding of the Town Hall doors contract to New England Schools for $52,100.
I will make that motion.
I will second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you to our facility manager, Mr. Keast. That's been a long-standing project, and to you as well. Thanks, Travis.
I think this was on my first agenda
It's
for
gonna
the
make a
select
big
board.
difference.
It's been on
So-
several, yeah.
So needed. Just in time, by
I
the way.
have tried to close those doors as I'm the last person out sometimes, and my shoulder still hurts for it.
I hear you. Food Waste Initiative from Sustainability. Is this you, Matt Zedek?
We do have Matt Zedek on the line.
Yes, hi folks. Thanks
Hi.
for coming on board. I have a busy agenda. In a brief summary, this would be a partnership with the town of Ashland to support the households currently in town that are privately subscribing for curbside food waste collection service with black earth compost. By partnering with Ashland, we're going to be able to lower the cost for those current households that are in the program, but also provide additional incentives for new households to join the program and help. The town particularly benefits by realizing the lower disposal cost on the trash side at the Wheelabrator facility, as well as just supporting a good practice that just makes common sense. Why pay additional use of tax dollars to get rid of something that's actually has value, and that's what food waste has when it's turned into compost. So happy to answer any questions and to move things along based on the background information I'd already provided.
Mr. Sparrow.
I actually had a conversation with Mr. Zedek earlier today where he explained a lot of it to me. I feel pretty comfortable with everything here. I think it's great working towards saving the taxpayer some money on the trash program, and looking for opportunities to help reduce waste is great, and I appreciate the effort here, and thank you very much for doing it. And I'm all set. Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, so Matt, I'm just going to read a little bit out of what you prepared for tonight here, and ask the question, when do you think we'll hit the total 500 households from the two towns in order to drop the subscription cost from $99 for 6 months to $59? Because that's significant. So that's my first question, is how long do you think it'll take to hit that number? And I know it's just a guess, but I'm going to assume it's an educated one. And then the second question I'd have is, how are we going to notify residents of Holliston that they should anticipate, or that they're about to see that their 6-month subscription cost has dropped 40% down to $59.99? Because I know that's a big goal of this program.
Yes, on the first issue, the additional challenge is of course because of the pandemic. But most of the time, when these programs have been introduced before, it's Black Earth is dealing with just one community. It's just a little harder to predict because we're partnering with somebody to be able to reach that threshold faster and get the prices lower faster for residents of both communities. So, talking to the Ashland coordinator and the Black Earth folks, we're hoping between maybe 3 months and 6 months we might be able to reach that threshold.
Okay.
Which would be great. That part of the incentive is one last incentive we were able to negotiate with Black Earth was helping to lower the cost for the existing subscribers by $10 from what they're currently paying for the first 3 months of the initiative, as well as for any new subscribers that sign up. So that would be an initial $10 off the cost of the subscription service, but then as you pointed out, once that threshold of 500 combined households is met, the actual cost would drop a total of 40% for those subscribers. And that's really the big goal, to really get those costs as low as possible for folks who are helping the town by taking that little bit of effort to compost their food waste and again help lower the cost of our trash disposal that we all pay for.
And this applies to people who currently, as of today or yesterday, are subscribers. They will benefit as well.
Correct.
All right, so I guess my second question was messaging. How do we get this message out there?
Yep, so 2 things. We're going to be developing, with the board's support, we'll develop a press release that would be sort of kicking off the initiative in a more public fashion. Black Earth is also committed to being in touch with their current subscribers. So they have 2 sets of folks that they're in contact with in Holliston. Existing subscribers who are receiving the service and paying for the service of Black Earth. There are also a number of households that have contacted Black Earth and said, we would love to be part of this program. It's just a little bit too much. We can't afford it at the moment, but please put us on a waiting list. And if costs come down, we really want to do this. So we're going to be able to target those folks as well. It's getting the word out to the existing subscribers, those who have expressed interest in it, doing the press release to do the initial kickoff on the publicity front. We're also looking to do a more in-depth cable or video. I'm not describing this too well, but basically a short little video feature that would describe the nature of the program, how it's conducted, but also really help educate people about why it's important to be composting our food waste as compared to just putting it in the trash bin and paying extra money for having it incinerated. So those are some of the next key steps for getting the word out to folks, as well as the typical social media and word of mouth.
Great.
All set?
Yeah.
Matt, the proposal you sent us indicates that this is a pilot initiative. Can you talk about what defines it as a pilot? Is this time sensitive? Will there be measurables? Tell me a little bit about the boundaries of pilot.
So we're calling it a pilot because we didn't want it to be open-ended, in part because the town is providing a little incentive for new subscribers by contributing some grant funds that we've already received from the DEP. So we didn't want to have an open-ended because the grant funds are not indefinite. They're not finite. So we needed to have that. We wanted to have a time frame involved, and that's why we put the word pilot in there. In part because we just didn't want to we didn't think the town officials and ourselves as sustainability coordinators felt the town would be in a position to do this as an ongoing commitment. But at the same time, because it is a private subscription service that we're pretty much just trying to encourage and incentivize through that help with the starter kit through those grant funds, we do pretty much anticipate that it'll keep going because the residents benefit by being able to compost those materials, and again, the town benefits as well.
Thank you. My next question is probably more for Travis, but Matt, you should know that I'm a big fan of publicly bidded goods and services. It does not sound like this was a publicly bid arrangement with Black Earth. It sounds like you contacted them because they have an existing program in Ashland, and you are looking to harness the buying power of two communities providing this to citizens. First question, is this available to commercial industries or is it just residential?
This is just for residential customers, and actually Ashland doesn't have a program. Right now, Holliston has more residents that are privately subscribing with Black Earth, almost 2-to-1 ratio compared to the amount of residents in Ashland that are privately subscribing with Black Earth. So this would be strictly, the thresholds for the pricing involved with this is strictly for residential customers. At the same time, the Black Earth, I don't think they have any commercial customers in town at the moment, other than they had been providing service at one of our schools. So again, this is what we're also hoping to have as a trickle-down benefit from this type of initiative is by the vendor, the more material the vendor can get, the cost come down, and hopefully that will also trickle down to any service that's provided at our schools.
So
Regarding your good question about the procurement, if I may.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Even back when you interviewed me for the position, you made that clear, and that was something I appreciated for sure, because that's been a big part of my work in the field for the last 30 years is making sure you do everything possible to maximize competition. So a couple quick notes on that one, Mr. Chairman. A, this particular service is actually exempt from 30B, which the town, so basically the town doesn't have to go out to bid. But at the same time, we absolutely want to do our due diligence to make sure we're getting the best pricing out there. So this is a particular service that actually the town would not want to procure. It's actually, we're just trying to support a private subscription service that residents are having. Secondly, we did check with the other vendors. There are very few vendors out there that provide this type of service, but we did check in with those vendors to see if they are servicing folks in town, and basically there's no other vendor providing this type of service in town other than to just a couple people. And then lastly, to your point, Mr. Chairman, this would not be an exclusive initiative from our perspective, so that if there's another vendor picking up food waste at people's homes in Holliston and or Ashland, please come to us and try to develop another. We're happy to, the more folks we can get composting their food waste through programs like this, the better. So this would not be an exclusive arrangement with Black Earth. They just happen to be the one vendor that's providing this type of service in eastern Massachusetts. They've built up their clientele over the last number of years, and they're pretty much the only player in town at the moment. But we would greatly love it if there was more competition out there, or more vendors providing this type of service. That just helps lower costs and gets more people involved doing the right thing. So we're hoping that'll come.
Okay, thanks, Matt. So there is no contract for the service?
Correct.
Any contract is between the consumer and Black Earth?
Yes.
Got it, thank you. All right, Matt, thanks so much. Do we need to take a vote on this, or is this just an accepted initiative that the sustainability coordinator is putting in place, Travis?
I would look for a vote of support for the food waste initiative.
I'll take a motion to support the food waste initiative as described by the sustainability coordinator.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, with one comment here, and I would encourage that this pilot, once it is up and going, that you look to extend the pilot, especially if it's successful. I wouldn't want to see this end just because today we've said that this is a pilot and has an ending point. So that's my comment on my second.
Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you, Matt. Good, nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to the agenda, we have an appointment.
Could I mention something?
Oh, please go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Joan Levinson, 66 Starbrook Road.
Hi, Joan.
I want to thank. Hi, how you all doing?
Good.
I want to thank everybody for approving this initiative. We've been talking about composting for a while. back when we were, doing our campaigning for a sustainability coordinator, and it's really an important initiative to have everybody compost and to have this program available to the citizens of Holliston and Ashland. And I just wanted to offer that I would like to help out with any publicity to get this out to the public through social media is something I could help out on. That's all I just wanted to say. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Very
Thank you.
grateful. Thanks, Joan. Nice to hear from you. All right, folks, we're going to move on with, if there are any other, I don't see any other questions at this point, to the next item on our agenda, which is the appointment to the Youth Advisory Committee. Mr. Clerk, do we have the member's name?
Yes, so we would make a motion to reappoint Allison Quinnen to the Youth Advisory Committee for a 3-year term.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Thank you, Allison.
The next item, Ben, would be the appointment to the Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees. Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that Tina...
No, I've got my finger on my nose.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? I'll second that.
No, that's not how this game works. If you touch your nose, you're out.
From a public health standpoint, you're not supposed to be.
Well, yeah, all righty.
No?
Who has the longest liaison list?
Who does have the longest
I don't
liaison?
think that's the way to look at it.
I will take the assignment. Thank you very much.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Keep going, Ben.
Saw that coming.
So
About 2 hours
I
ago.
have a donation from the Hallston Superette to our senior center in support of the senior nutrition program in the amount of $400. So I make a motion to receive a gift from the Hallston Superette to the senior center nutrition fund to support senior nutrition.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries.
For that
Next.
generous donation, Superette. I have a donation from Wayne Griffin to the Blair Square. It's for the Blair Square parking lighting project in the amount of $500. So I'll make a motion to accept a gift from Wayne Griffin for the Blair Square parking lighting project in the amount of $500.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries. I will take a motion to accept the board meeting minutes for August 10th, 2020 and August 25th, 2020.
I will make that motion for both August 10th and August 25th.
I have a
I
motion.
will
Do I-
second it.
Any discussion on those? Hearing none, we'll approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That approves the meeting minutes of the August 10th and 25th. Final item on the agenda, other business. Mr. Sparrow?
I'm sick of hearing myself talk, so no other business.
We'll see if Ms. Hyde feels that same way.
Yeah, I do feel that way about myself, but I'm
But-
going to speak, and I will do it in 30 seconds or less. I met with the Trail Committee, or rather, I attended their meeting on Wednesday night. The Trail Committee is concerned about the number of abutters encroaching on the rail bed. Our deed requires that we do not allow encroachment onto the rail bed due to concerns of contaminated soil. So the Trail Committee, rightly so, does not feel like they are an enforcing body. They are looking for the Select Board to step up for that role, as we have in the past. And so I have an email exchange going with the chair of the Trail Committee. He should be able to provide me a list of abutters, at which point he will come before the board and request that we issue a letter of a reminder, a letter with enforcement language, and yeah.
And I don't know about how close you are to the records involving this, but I do recall sending them out within the last 2 years on at least one occasion, maybe more than that. So this is a recurring maintenance, if you will, of our interest and rights on that trail. So,
And the reason we don't have a list today is because the chair would like to update the list. So we will know new addresses that come on, and then we will also know addresses that have previously been sent this letter. So
Could you do me a favor,
Yeah.
to the extent that any of the changes of address may involve or impact previous agreements. So if I recall correctly, I may be out of turn, but I don't think so. I think there were some abutters who we gave sort of in situ agreements to, like, leave in place until they convey their property. If I recall correctly, I think that was the case with one or two landowners. As long as they own it, we're not going to make them change it, but if it transfers ownership, we would. Check with Bob to find out if he has a recollection of that. I know of at least one abutter that featured.
Okay, I will
Thanks.
do that, yes, no problem. That's all I had.
Okay, I will at this point entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Good night, Holliston. It is now 9:40. We appreciate your help tonight, listening in and contributing to our meeting. Have a great night. Good night.